Hello again, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed that second CAD session. I know we did a bit more this time, CADing 2 parts. You guys are really improving, getting a lot faster, so that's really good to see. Today I'll be going through the full tutorial of the connecting rod and the crankshaft. So, in this video, I will be starting with the connecting rod, which is this piece right here. Basically connects the piston to the crankshaft. And I'll also be CADing this cap part that just sits right on top of this piece right here. And then next video, I will be going over this crankshaft. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started on our connecting rod. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a sketch, and this is going to be on the ZX plane, so our blue and red axis plane. Next, we're going to create 2 circles on the origin, so the very center, intersection of the axes, create a circle. The first one is just going to be 30 millimeters. The second one is going to be in the same center, so concentric, 55 millimeters. Next, we're going to create another 2 circles centered on this axis right here. So make sure it's not floating around over here, just on the axis. And it should snap to it once you get close enough. We're going to click on there. First circle is going to be 65 millimeters. Second one, once again, is concentric. And it will be 90 millimeters. Next, we're going to have to create a dimensional constraint on these 2 different circles. So first we're going to hit the center of first circle, then the center of the second. It might not highlight the center, it might just highlight this outer rim, but when you click it, it should still select the center. And the distance over here is going to be 200 millimeters. Once you have that set, we're going to create not a 2-point rectangle, but a center rectangle. You can find it in the drop-down. And we want that center rectangle to be, once again, on this axis. So not above or below, just snapped right on that axis. I'm gonna click. Now the dimensions for this rectangle are going to be 35 by 165 millimeters. Go ahead and hit enter. And finally, we're going to create another sketch dimension from the center of this rectangle to the center of our first 2 circles. And we're going to make that distance 100 millimeters. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have to trim off some of this unnecessary geometry here. And what I mean by that is that when we're trying to extrude this in 3D, it's going to look for some sort of profile to extrude. And you can see when I hover my mouse over this profile, it kind of splits this into many different profiles, right? So we just want that to be one continuous profile. To do that, we're going to use our trim tool up at the top here. And we're just going to trim off some of these extra edges. So here, 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 and then these 2 right there. So you can see once we escape from our trim tool and hover back over, it selects the entire profile, one continuous profile. Right? It looks a little bit like a magnifying glass. Next, we're going to have to do the same thing over here, because when we extrude this smaller ring, we want this entire ring, right? But then there's this little boxed off portion left over from the rectangle. So to get rid of that, once again, our trim tool, and we're just going to trim this small piece at the top and this little piece at the bottom. And don't worry too much about the warnings, that is not going to affect us at all. So you can trim this if you want. I'm not going to because it's not entirely necessary. So as you can see, once you hover over again, it selects this entire ring profile. Right? So here and here. It's 2 continuous profiles. Next, we're going to do something called a 2D fillet. So I know you guys are familiar with the 3D fillet, basically just smooths out the edges, but this 2D fillet does the same thing except in 2D. So we're going to hit that right next to your trim tool, and then we're just going to select these 2 corners that connect this ring to our rectangle. And we're going to have that be 75 millimeters. So 75 millimeter radius 2D fillet. And that just smooths out our part a little bit more. Now a final piece before we finish this sketch is we're going to have to add a line from the top of this circle, top of the outer circle, to the bottom of the outer circle. So we're basically drawing a diameter, splitting this circle in half. Next, we're going to use our trim tool once again. We're just going to trim out half of that ring. So once we escape from our trim tool, you can see once again we still have these two profiles, the ring, and now when you highlight it, it's some sort of a wrench shape. So once you have all that done, we're done with our sketch and we can hit Finish Sketch. We can go to our home view and now we can begin to extrude our design. Once again, extrude is in the top left. Hit extrude. Select this first profile here, the wrench shape profile. Make sure that it's two-sided and we want that to go 10 millimeters in both directions for a total thickness of 20 millimeters. And hit OK. Now you can see that once we've finished that extrude, this sketch over here, our ring, kind of just disappeared. But that is totally okay because Fusion 360 does this automatically. It doesn't mean your sketch is gone, right? So we can navigate over here to our feature tree and find our sketches folder. And if it's collapsed, you can just hit this arrow and open up that folder. And you can see that sketch has a little eyeball that's crossed out right now. It's grayed out. That means you can't see the sketch. It's being hidden. If we go ahead and click that eyeball, we can see the sketch again. And we can now go ahead and extrude this ring. Now this ring, once again, two sides, but we want 15 millimeters on each side this time. And that's 15 millimeters on each side for a total thickness of 30 millimeters. And then we're just going to go ahead and hit OK. Now we don't want this sketch to be bothering our eyes throughout this whole process. So we can just go back here and deselect the view option, and that just hides the sketch again. So we can just look at this 3D object. Okay, so once you have that part done, we're now going to create another sketch. So create sketch, and this time we're not going to be selecting one of these planes. Instead, we're going to be selecting the face of this wrench shaped piece. And that should take you on to this face because we're going to be creating a sketch using the geometry on this face. So now we're going to be learning a new tool called offset. And you'll find that right next to your trim tool in the top. And basically what offset does is that it takes a contour and kind of makes a copy of it a certain distance away. And it'll make more sense once we actually use it. So we're going to go ahead and click offset. Going to click this contour on the right here. And we're going to offset that -7.5 millimeters. And negative just because we want it to go on the inside. Right? So we're just going to click OK there. And one final touch we're going to have to make is we're going to use our 2D fillet one more time to kind of get rid of these like sharp corners. So 2D fillet next to your trim tool. And we're going to first select one. And we're going to have to actually change it to 5 millimeters. Or else it's kind of going to mess things up over here. So like if you try it initially to leave it at its default value of 10 and start clicking the corners, it's going to give you an error. So we're going to have to click one, change it to 5, and then finish clicking all 4 corners. It should just give you a more rounded out shape of that contour. Okay, so we're going to hit enter. And at this point, we have finished the second sketch. So we can go ahead and finish sketch. Go to our home view, and we're actually going to be extruding this into our piston connecting rod. Right, so the distance isn't going to be positive, it's going to be -7.5 millimeters. And it just cuts this little contour into our part. I'm going to click OK. And now we can see that it has cut a little groove in there. Now, we do want this same pattern on the other side, but we are going to be lazy, right? We don't want to do all that work of sketching and extruding on the other side. So we're just going to use a handy tool called mirror, right? So mirror should be in your toolbar right now. If not, once again, please add it. Just click the drop down, mirrors under pattern, 3 dots, and pin to toolbar. So we're going to be using our mirror tool, selecting features, and the feature we're going to select is actually this most recent extrude right down here in our timeline. Should highlight that in blue for you. And our mirror plane is just going to be our XZ axis, so our blue and red. It should just mirror it right over to the other side. Just see a little gray silhouette. Exactly what we want. We're going to click OK. Now, when we look at the other side, we see that it has copied this hole onto the other side as well, saving us a lot of time. All right. And this one, it wasn't a whole lot of work to do, but in the future, mirror is going to be super, super useful in copying designs that have symmetry. And we're actually going to see that in the next piece that we're going to do. Right. So let's get a start on that. We're going to create sketch actually on the tip of our rod. So the very tip, we're going to click, it should take us to this face, and now we're going to create a circle on the edge of this rectangle, but aligned with the center. So it should snap to this axis and align with the edge of this rectangular face. We're going to click. We're going to set that circle to 20 millimeters, and it should rest right on the edges, right on the edges. Now, we're going to finish that sketch, and then we're going to hit extrude. I'm going to extrude both halves, negative 35 millimeters. Now, by default, because this is running into or has overlap with something we've already extruded, it's going to automatically assume we're trying to cut away material. But to change that, all we have to do is go to our operation, hit join instead, and it will create material, which is what we want. So once we have that, we're going to hit OK. Now, we also want a hole inside of here. So we're going to go back onto this face, create a sketch, and another circle. Now this time, it might be a little bit trickier to find where to center the circle. But the way to do that is we're going to follow along on this axis. And right now you can see the cursor is a green square. But once we get far down enough, it turns into a green circle. And that means this is just the center of the previous circle that we sketched out. We're going to find that green center, and then we're going to extrude that, we're going to make that diameter 10 millimeters, which I somehow found perfectly, but you can type that in, hit enter. Once again, circle 10 millimeters centered at that same spot. So now go ahead and finish our sketch, and we're going to extrude this one more time. And that's going to be a distance of negative 35 millimeters so that it cuts a hole all the way through. Go ahead and click OK, and you'll see that it cut a hole all the way through, which is what we want. Now we want this same piece on this other side here, right? We want that symmetry. And just like this face we cut in over here, we don't want to do all that work on the other side. So we're going to use our handy mirror tool, make sure features are selected, and we're going to select our last two features. So this hole that we extruded and the outside part. Once again, the last two features, and we're going to mirror that over the XY plane. If it lets me select it. There we go, the XY plane. And once you select your plane, it should have a gray silhouette of the piece that it's going to mirror onto the other side. Once you have that, you're going to click OK. And you'll see that with very minimal effort, we were able to just completely mirror what we just did onto the other side, saving us a lot of time, which is exactly what we want. So at this point in time, we're completely done with the CAD for this connecting rod. We're just going to do a little bit of refinement with our 3D fillets. So once again, this is up to personal preference, what you think looks good. I'm just going to walk you through the way I decided to fillet this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select, it's kind of tricky, these ones. It's just the connecting part between the cylinder and our wrench. It's like a little curved arch shape. Same thing on the other side, those two. And then just this little groove that we cut in both of those edges. So 1, 2. And these will all be 2 millimeter fillets. Go ahead and hit enter. Next, I'm going to fillet the inner and outer edges of the cylinder and just this outside edge of our connecting rod. And then once again, do the exact same thing on the other side. So inner, outer, and the two outer edges of our connecting rod, and that's just going to be a 1 millimeter fillet. Go ahead and hit enter. And finally, one more thing we're going to fillet is this contour right here. So the connection between our rod and this cylindrical piece that will be connected to our piston head. And this is just going to be another 2 millimeter fillet. Now, these go a little bit fast, but feel free to pause at each point to make sure you get down each of those dimensions, or you could just play around yourself to whatever you think looks good. So now you can see we just refined the edges a bit. Looks a bit nicer than the straight, sharp edges that we had before. And at this point in time, we're completely done with this connecting rod. So we're going to hit Control S and save that as our connecting rod. Then we're just going to go ahead and save it in the right folder. So I have a bunch of folders open. I have a bunch of folders open. You guys should have one that's just named CAD Camp with your name next to it. Okay, and just save it there, and you should see it appear in your sidebar. Now we're going to quickly CAD this other side, the piece that clamps on here. It's going to look something like this, the connecting rod cap. And we actually already know how to do this, so it's just going to be really quick. So hit New Design in the top. Should bring you a blank canvas, and then we're going to CAD this out really quick. So once again, sketch on the ZX plane, the vertical ZX, red and blue. 2 circles, just like we did last time, in the very center. So this will be 65 millimeters and 90 millimeters. And we're going to cut this in half again with a line. So at the very top down to the very bottom, cut it in half with a line. And this time we're going to trim the other side, right? Because this is the finishing piece. This part just finishes that full circle. So you can pause it here to finish up this sketch. And I'm going to move on to the 3D extrusion part. So we'll go ahead and finish the sketch. And we're just going to extrude this outer ring right here. So click this profile. Once again, we want that to be on both sides. And we're going to do that for 10 millimeters on each side. You remember from our connecting rod. And we're just going to go ahead and hit OK. And we're going to switch our orientation to this corner. You can either do it with your rotation cube or Shift and middle button on the mouse. Now we're going to create a sketch on this little tip. Once again, just like on the connecting rod, create sketch. It's going to be the exact same thing. Circle in the center on that edge, 20 millimeters. In your sketch. Once again, extrude that. Both halves, negative 35 millimeters. Vision 360 thinks we're cutting, but we actually want to select join in our operation. Hit OK. And once again, sketch on this face. Circle. Find that center of the previous circle, which is going to be right here. Once your cursor turns into a green circle instead of a square, click there for your center, and we want that to be 10 millimeters. Hit enter. I'm going to finish that sketch. And if you remember, we're going to extrude this to be a 35 millimeter hole instead. Negative 35 millimeters, hit enter, and we see that it has created a hole all the way through. Just like on the connecting rod, we don't want to have to do this all again on the other side. We're going to use our mirror tool, make sure features are selected, and we're going to do our last 2 features. So the hole and the outer cylinder, and we're going to mirror that over our XY axis. Shows the gray preview on the other side. We're just going to hit OK. And now we have this connecting rod cap done. So once again, we can just refine with our 3D fillets. Over here, there's just going to be one thing I'm going to be filleting, which is the connection from our rod to this little cylindrical piece that we just created. That little curved arch. It's a little bit tough to select, but once you find it, we're going to make that 2 millimeters. And you can see that this fillet actually added material. So this will actually make this piece stronger. Okay, so once you have that done, it should look a little something like this. And we are completely done with our connecting rod. So now we can go ahead and hit Control S. And I already saved my part, but to show, I'm going to hit Save As. It should pop up this menu, and you're just going to call this your connecting rod cap and put that in your CAD Camp folder. Hit Save, and it should show up right on the side here with the rest of your parts. So that is all I have for you in this video tutorial. Once again, we just CAD'ed out our connecting rod and the connecting rod cap. And next tutorial, I will be teaching you guys how to CAD this crankshaft, which is going to be really cool. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. If you have any questions, feel free to email myself or Michael. And I will see you in the next tutorial.